Bills Mafia, drop what you're doing, because there is a name floating around the league right now that should make every single one of you sit up straight. A Super Bowl champion, a two-time Pro Bowler, a 347-pound wrecking ball who has spent his entire career living in opposing backfields. And as of this week, he has officially requested a trade out of Tampa Bay. His name is Vita Vea, and folks, if you know anything about what plagued the Buffalo Bills defense last season, you already know exactly why this name should have your full attention. Here's how this all unfolded. According to reporting, Vea reportedly held in during mandatory minicamp because he wanted a new contract, and it doesn't sound like the two sides are anywhere close to an agreement. He is entering the final year of his current deal, a contract that pays him a base salary of $17 million this season with a cap hit of $22 million and a dead cap number of $6 million if Tampa were to move on. That's a very manageable number for the Buccaneers to carry, which tells you this situation isn't about Tampa Bay being desperate to dump money. This is about Vea wanting to be paid like the elite player he still is, and the two sides simply not finding common ground. So now, at 31 years old, in the final year of his deal, Vita Vea has made his intentions clear. He wants out, and he wants to go somewhere that can actually win. Let's talk about why this guy is such a big deal in the first place. Because casual fans might just see defensive tackle and shrug, that would be a mistake. Vea was a first-round pick back in 2018, taken 12th overall, and he became a foundational piece of the Tampa Bay defensive front that won a Super Bowl during the 2020 season alongside Tom Brady. He's not chasing a ring to validate his career. He already has one, which means wherever he lands next, he's not going there for the experience. He's going there because he believes that team can win right now. And here's what separates Vea from your average run-stuffing nose tackle: he can actually rush the passer. Over the last 4 years, he's averaged more than 5 sacks per season, which is almost unheard of from a true nose tackle. According to national analysts breaking down the interior defensive line landscape, there are really only 2 nose tackles in the entire league who consistently provide legitimate pass rush production from that spot: Dexter Lawrence of the Giants and Vita Vea. That's the company he keeps. And because he commands double teams on nearly every single snap, he doesn't just make his own plays. He frees up everybody else around him to make theirs. Now, for some context on his market value, look no further than what just happened with Dexter Lawrence. The Giants recently traded him for a package built around a number 10 overall pick. But, and this is an important caveat, Lawrence is 3 years younger than Vea. And that deal happened in a draft class that was considered thin on top-tier talent, which pushed the Bengals to be aggressive. For Vea, at 31, the going rate being discussed by people around the league is something closer to a second-round pick, plus additional compensation. Still significant, but a very different price tag than what Lawrence commanded. So who actually makes sense as a trade destination? Analysts have floated a handful of contenders, and this is where things get really interesting for Buffalo. Green Bay has been mentioned as a real possibility. The Packers are shifting to a new defensive scheme under a new defensive coordinator, moving from a 4-3 front to a 3-4, and they just paid Devontae Wyatt. Adding Vea would allow their front to operate exactly the way it's designed to, freeing up their other pass rushers, including a certain former Cowboy who has become must-watch television every time he steps on the field. The Los Angeles Chargers have also come up in the conversation, partly because there are rumors Vea wants to return to the West Coast, and partly because the Chargers, despite having size up front, lack real interior pass rush juice. And then, of course, there's Tampa Bay simply keeping him, which remains entirely possible. Just because a player requests a trade doesn't mean the team is obligated to grant it. But let's talk about the team that should have every single Bills fan leaning forward in their seat: Buffalo. Here's the brutal truth about last season's Buffalo Bills defense. It was, by a lot of measures, the worst run defense in professional football. The Bills gave up nearly 140 yards per game on the ground. They were tied for the worst mark in the league in rushing touchdowns allowed, surrendering a jaw-dropping 24 rushing scores over the course of the season. 24. That is not a small problem. That is a gaping hole in the middle of a defense that opposing offensive coordinators absolutely feasted on, especially in cold-weather playoff football where physical, run-heavy attacks are designed to slow everything down and keep Josh Allen standing on the sideline. Now overlay that reality with what's happening schematically in Buffalo this offseason. New defensive coordinator Jim Leonhard is switching the Bills from a 4-3 front to a 3-4 defense. And one of the biggest lingering questions all offseason has been whether Buffalo actually has the right personnel in place to run that scheme effectively. Enter Vita Vea. Slotting him in at nose tackle would be close to a plug-and-play fit. It would allow Ed Oliver to kick over and play an attacking three technique role, hunting quarterbacks instead of getting swallowed up trying to occupy blockers. It would take double teams away from the rest of the front seven. And most importantly, it would free up linebacker Terrell Bernard to flow freely and make plays in space instead of constantly fighting through blockers just to reach the ball carrier. Buffalo also already has a promising young piece on the interior in Deion Walker, the rookie out of Kentucky the Bills took in last year's draft. And here's the beautiful part. Bringing in Vea wouldn't mean pushing Walker aside or stunting his growth. It would mean pairing an established, championship-tested wrecking ball right alongside him, creating a rotation that opposing offensive lines simply cannot game plan their way around. Picture this. Vea and Walker both lined up in short yardage situations, physically incapable of being moved off the ball. Picture opposing offenses being forced away from the middle of the field entirely, funneling everything toward Buffalo's speed on the outside right into the teeth of a defense built to finish plays. That's not just an upgrade. That's a complete shift in defensive identity. And this cannot be measured in regular season box scores alone. This is about January. This is about the Buffalo Bills year after year running into the same buzzsaw of physical, ground-and-pound football that grinds games to a halt and leaves Josh Allen standing helplessly on the sideline, watching the clock bleed away while his own defense can't get off the field. Allen has spent entire postseasons being asked to be perfect because his defense couldn't hold up when it mattered. At some point, that defense has to give the ball back. It has to make a stop. It has to be the unit that changes a game instead of the unit that loses it. And it's not just about stopping the run either. Vea has shown he can push the pocket from the interior, collapsing plays from the middle in a way that outside pass rushers simply can't replicate. Offenses can chip an edge rusher. They can slide protection toward the outside all game long. But when the pocket caves in from directly in front of the quarterback's face, there's nowhere left to hide. That interior pressure makes every other piece of a pass rush more dangerous. And it's exactly the missing ingredient that could elevate Buffalo's entire defensive front from average to genuinely feared. Now let's be responsible here, because this is still very much a hypothetical and it needs to be treated that way. There is no confirmed Bills trade. There is no reported offer from Buffalo. There is no indication a deal is close, or that the Bills have even called Tampa Bay. What we do know is that Vea has requested a trade, contract talks stalled, and the entire league is now watching to see which contender makes the move. Green Bay makes sense on paper. The Chargers make sense on paper. But when you actually look at what Buffalo has been desperately missing for multiple postseasons in a row, this might be the single most fascinating potential fit in the entire conversation. There's also a real price tag to consider, and Bills fans need to go in with eyes wide open. Vea is 31 years old, entering the last year of his contract, and looking for long-term financial security on his next deal. Any trade almost certainly requires meaningful draft compensation heading back to Tampa Bay, likely in the range of a second-round pick or more. On top of that draft cost, Buffalo would then have to negotiate and likely extend an aging interior defender immediately after acquiring him. That's not a small commitment. That's real draft capital and real long-term money being put on the table for a player already past his 30th birthday. Buffalo's front office would have to weigh all of it: the medical evaluations, the contract ask, the draft cost, against exactly how much elite football they believe Vea still has left in the tank. But here's the counterpoint, and it's a powerful one. Contenders don't get unlimited chances. Josh Allen is in his prime right now, right this very moment. This is not a rebuilding football team looking to stash draft picks for some far-off future. This is a team that has been agonizingly close year after year and has watched the same defensive weaknesses resurface at the exact same time every single postseason. This is not the era for Buffalo to be making moves that look smart 3 years from now while another Super Bowl window quietly closes because the defense couldn't get one final crucial stop when everything was on the line. Green Bay could pair Vea with an already dangerous ascending defensive front. The Chargers could plug him in to complement a talented but pass-rush-starved defensive line. Both of those situations make plenty of sense. But neither of those teams has quite what Buffalo has: a generational top-5 quarterback who is good enough to win the entire thing right now if just given a little more help, and a fan base that is quite frankly exhausted from watching the same soft underbelly show up in January year after painful year. So Bills Mafia, here's the real question, and we want your honest answer in the comments. If Tampa Bay actually made Vita Vea available and the compensation landed somewhere reasonable, would you want Buffalo's front office to go get him? Are you willing to give up a valuable draft pick and take on a big new contract for a 31-year-old, even knowing the risk that comes with paying for age on the wrong side of a career? Or is this simply too rich a price for a Buffalo team that already has other holes to fill across this roster? This is exactly the kind of bold, difficult, win-now decision that separates teams who are content just competing from teams who are actually built to finish the job. Buffalo has the quarterback. Buffalo has the offense. What Buffalo has lacked time and time again is a defensive front capable of standing its ground when the games get cold, physical, and slow. Vita Vea might just be the answer nobody saw coming this offseason. Or he might end up being another name that gets away, headed to a division rival or an AFC contender who beats Buffalo to the punch. Either way, this is a storyline worth watching extremely closely over the coming weeks because trade requests like this one rarely stay quiet for long. So keep your eyes locked here at Buffalo Focus because the moment there's real smoke on this situation, we will be all over it with the breakdown you need. All right, Bills Mafia, that's the full story. Drop your honest opinion in the comments below. Would you make this trade? Or is it too big of a risk for a player on the wrong side of 30? Smash that like button, subscribe to Buffalo Focus so you never miss a single update as this situation develops. And let us know who else you think Buffalo should be calling this offseason. We'll see you in the next one. Go Bills!